Auspicious greeting. Welcome to the core teachings of the Buddhist class. I'm Venerable Xing from FoGuangHuB Temple in Los Angeles, and I'll be teaching this class in this spring semesters. Although we cannot meet in person, but we can meet online through the Google Meet in the Q&A session twice a month. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to write your questions in the Google Classroom, or you can ask during the Q&A sessions. And now, before we get into class, I would like to do a little bit of a reflections. Now, please take out a piece of paper and a pen, and you can write down these questions and your answers to them. Okay. So what are some of the dissatisfactions you have in life? What do you think is the causes of your dissatisfactions? Why do we become emotional when we didn't get the things that we want? Why do you think we will have stress? Why do we have fear when we're seriously ill or even facing death? The pandemic has continued for more than a year now. How does that affect our life, or how is our life affected by it? Why do some people become more negative because of it, because of the pandemic? How do you think we can find peace at heart? You may now pause the video and take some time to write down your answers. Every day, we might encounter some situation that I mentioned in the questions above. However, we rarely spend time to ponder upon them, to really think about the causes of these sufferings or dissatisfactions we have. We just simply let our emotion react to these situations, and of course our mind following the conditions, going up and down in response to them. This may be the reason why some of us decide to take this class to learn the Buddhist teachings, to hope to seek or find a solutions to the problems or the afflictions in our life. Of course, this leads us onto this spiritual journey in seeking a way to finding happiness. Actually, 2,600 years ago, there was also a young man who started on a journey in seeking the end of sufferings, and his name was Prince Siddhartha, who later became Sakyamuni Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. And from the Buddha's life, we could actually get a glimpse of what is learning Buddhism is about. The Buddha actually belonged to the Saklan clan, and his father was King Suddhodana of city of Kapilavastu, which is located in Nepal by the Himalayas mountain. And his mother was Queen Maya from the city of Devaraja. When the little prince was born, there was a Brahmin seer who came by and made a prophecy. And he said, when the prince grew up, he might become the greatest monarch who would actually unite all these countries around. Or he might become a great teacher who would be able to find a way to liberation, to end sufferings. When the king heard this, he was both happy and worried. Of course, he wanted the prince to succeed after him, to become a great king. So since the little prince was young, the king always surrounded him with young people, with entertainment, with music and fun. And of course, the prince also received a lot of educations. The prince was actually very intelligent. He basically mastered everything that he learned, whether it's in education, like the scholar side of things, or in martial art side of things. But of course, the king, being worried, always tried to surround him with all kinds of wealth and luxuries. And he even built a palace for each seasons for the prince. And of course, he also made arrangement for the prince to marry to Princess Yasodhara, and later on they have a son. But the prince was always very quiet, and he always preferred to take a walk on his own and contemplate. And one day, he decided to venture out of the cities or ventured out of the palace. And as he went out of the palace, he saw an old man. And when he saw the sight, this sight basically confused him. And he asked his chariotees or his drivers, Chatna, he said, "Look at that man. He has white hair, a bent back, and he trembled. Why did he arrive at this state? Was he born this way?" And Chatna has no choice but to answer him because he didn't want to lie to him. He said, "My prince, you already know that he is an old man. That's why you see his skin color, it changes, and his memory fade, and he looked very frail, and one day he would also pass away." When the prince heard this, he said, "Would this happen to everyone? Would it happen to the king? Would it happen to me?" And Chatna said, "My prince, yes, it happened to everyone. Every one of us would grow old. No one can avoid it." After hearing what Chatna said, the prince was struck by the realization of the impermanence of all phenomena. And he didn't want to travel out of the palace and tour around anymore. So he returned back to the palace. And later on, he get another two chance to venture out of the palace. And one time he saw a sick man, and the other time he saw a dead person. And these two sights really troubled him and filled him with agitation and sufferings. And finally, one day the prince got to head out of the city wall again, and he saw a practitioner or a renunciate. And the prince asked, "Who are you? Why are you dressed in such a strange clothing?" And the renunciate replied, "I'm one who has left the tide of my family. I wish to escape the sufferings of aging, illness, and death. My purpose is to find the great path of freedom and liberation. No one can avoid aging, illness, and death, and none can escape impermanence in any form. This is why I left my home and tried to find a way out of this, a way out of like beyond birth and death. And my only aim is to take the world's suffering upon myself. For if I don't work to liberate beings from the great seas of birth and death, who will?" Upon hearing this word, the prince's heart was filled with joy. He said, "I felt the same. This is exactly what I want to do. I too wish to free all beings from sufferings." And that night, the prince left the palace and became a renunciate and went on what the sutras call the noble search. And what is the noble search? There is the case where a person himself, being subject to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth, seek the unborn, unexcelled rest from the yoke, unbinding, himself being subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, seeing the drawbacks of aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement, seek the agingness, illnessness, deathness, sorrowness, undefiled, unexcelled rest from the yoke, unbinding. This is the noble search. So what the sutras is telling us is that Prince Siddhartha has seen the suffering and the drawback from birth, old age, sickness, and death, and he wished to seek a way to be liberated from them. And so this is what the noble search is about. And so for the prince, after he left home, he practiced meditation for some time, but he still couldn't find a way out of sufferings. Therefore, he decided to turn to ascetic practices, which he started to eat only a grain of rice every single day for 6 years. And he came to the conclusion that inflicting pain on the body was just another form of attachment to the body. He couldn't be he couldn't find an answer from ascetic practice either. And so the prince contemplated, and he said, if my practice is only about appearances and has nothing to do with the purity of my mind, of course it will produce no great effects. To purify my mind, I must transcend such limitation. These ascetic practices and fasting will never lead me to finding the path. Upon this realization, the prince accepted an offerings from the shepherd lady, like a rice porridge, and regained his energy. And after he regained his energy, he sat down by a Bodhi tree and started to contemplate upon the great questions of birth and death. And he contemplated about dependent origination, which is how everything arises from causes and conditions. We'll actually talk more about this in future classes. And on that night, he became the Buddha. The word Buddha is a Sanskrit word that referred to the awakened one, someone who's awakened or realized the truth of the universe. And upon awakening, the first thing that the Buddha said was, marvelous, marvelous. All sentient beings have the Tathagata wisdom and virtue, but they fail to realize it because they cling to deluded thoughts and attachment. So, what is learning Buddhism about? From the life of the Buddha, we can actually get some clues from it. It started off with the prince seeking a way out of sufferings, like old age, sickness, and death. And just like all of us, we experience various dissatisfactions and sufferings in our life. Prince Siddhartha then had on a quest to find a solution or a way to end these sufferings. This is also like what we do. But then we will try to find different method in ending the dissatisfactions or sufferings that we have. However, unlike the prince who ultimately attained enlightenment and realized the truth, for us, we would turn our attentions to things that we like to do, like shoppings, or having any kind of sensual pleasures, travelings, partying, and so on. And we would do these things to divert our attentions from the problem and troubles we have in life. Of course, this then begs the question of how come we can't find this peace and ultimate happiness? And the Buddha actually answered us already when he said this phrase, when all sentient beings have the Tathagata wisdom and virtue, but they fail to realize it because they cling to delusion and attachment. So from this, we could actually get a clue. This is telling us that we all have this innate Buddha wisdom and virtue, but we fail to realize it because of our deluded thoughts or our delusion, not understanding the true realities of life, and of course, due to our attachment. And it's because we don't see the world as it is, but what we think it is. Not seeing the world with clarity, with the right view and perspective, leads to dissatisfactions and sufferings or afflictions in our life. For example, we all don't like to step out of our comfort zone, but have you ever think about why that is? If we really think about why we don't like to step out of our comfort zone, it is because we don't like to change. We don't like changes. However, can we prevent changes in our environment or in all kinds of conditions? The obvious answer is no. We cannot prevent changes because it's bound to happen. But our desires is to stay in comfort zone and believe that we will always be able to stay in our comfort zone. When changes do occur that force us out of it, we become very agitated, frustrated, upset, nervous, and stressed out. On the other hand, if we understand that changes are normal, it is just how it is, and learn to be flexible, we won't have all these mental sufferings at all. Therefore, learning Buddhism is about learning to view the world in accordance to the Dharma, meaning the true realities of the world. The Dharma refers to the objective truth of the universe. It is actually independence of the Buddha's existence because the Buddha only discovered the Dharma or these truths. He didn't create them. And this is why he said, don't believe me just because I said it. Observe it for yourself because it's there. Of course, we might then have some question thinking, okay, what is truth? Every religion might say that their teaching is the truth. And of course, for our definitions, it is the first for something to be a truth, it need to be universals, meaning it applied to everyone, regardless of your races. So it should be the same for European, African, Asian, American, and so on. So it's the same for everyone. And it applied everywhere, regardless of where you are. So whether you're in Asia, Africa, Australia, Europe, and so on, it's the same. And it applied through times. So it's the same for the past, for the present, and for the futures. And of course, it is inevitable. Like what it means is that it will eventually happen. And it is as such. It will just happen as such. So these are some of the qualities or criteria, I would say, for a truth. And of course, as we're contemplating about the Dharma, we can then think about, okay, is this universals? Does it happen to everyone, everywhere, and through time? Is it inevitable? Does it happen as such? So we can then try to observe these Dharma and see for ourselves. And so this is why the Buddha is always encouraging us, like his disciple, to try it and experience the Dharma for ourselves. Because we can also say that the Dharma is just how the world or how the universe runs. It is just how it is. If we just observe them, we should be able to see some traces of the truth for ourselves as well. And we will be able to see that the Dharma is indeed in our life. The Buddha also once said, all that I teach is sufferings and the ending of sufferings. Of course, the suffering that the Buddha taught is not just about physical sufferings, it's also about mental sufferings as well. And the Buddha's teachings told us about the truth of our situation and how the universe is run so that we can end the sufferings that we experience and be able to see the world with clarity. Therefore, learning Buddhism is actually embarking on a journey of self-discoveries. Of course, we might think that I know all about myself. What I want to find out is a way to end my problems or a way to eliminate my afflictions. But here I must tell you that learning more about yourself and seeing the world with clarity is exactly the solution for the problems in our life. Currently, because we fail to realize how delusive we view the world and everything that happened, defilement and afflictions arise. And now that we learn a bit about what learning Buddhism is about, the next question we might have is, how do we learn Buddhism? There are actually four main steps in learning Buddhism. listen, contemplate, practice, and realizations. And I'll go into details into what each of these are. Okay, the first step is to listen. In Buddhism, we have a metaphor to describe learning, like listening to the Dharma. So normally the Dharma or the Buddhist teachings is referred to rain or water, and a practitioner or the student who is learning about Buddhism is referred to a Dharma vessel, a vessel that's able to hold the Buddhist teachings, or of course the vessel that can hold these Dharma water. And so there are a few kinds of vessel that we can be. Of course, we want to be a good empty vessel. This is referring to someone who's able to hold all kinds of teachings and able to memorize them. And a vessel with poison inside refer to someone who come to class with prejudice or erroneous view, or they may have some view about what Buddhism is. So when they come into class and listen to teachers, no matter what the teacher said, they would not really accept it because they already set their mind to believe what they think Buddhism is about. So they can't hold more water. This is just like, oh, the bowl is already filled with some dirty water. And even if I want to add more water to it, it is still dirty water. And of course, there's another type of vessel, the leaky vessel. Leaky vessel refer to someone who listened to the teachings in class, but they didn't remember them. They forget about them right after class. So now you're listening to class, but after class, you just forget about them, just like you have never learned it before. So for the leaky vessel, you pour water in, but the water just like leak out. So at the end, this vessel holds no water at all. And of course, there's also another type of vessel we call the upside down vessel. This refers to someone who's not focused and concentrate when they listen to Dharma. They may even fall asleep. So right after class, they couldn't remember anything at all, just like they have never heard of it before. This is just like a bowl. If you turn the bowl upside down, no matter how much water you pour in, it will hold nothing. So how should we listen to the Dharma? In every sutras, sutras refer to the discourse between the Buddha and his disciples. And normally it starts off with a disciple or someone asking questions to the Buddha. Before the Buddha answered the questions, he would always say, listen carefully, listen mindfully, listen truthfully. And of course, really like listen truthfully as taught by the Buddha. And you might have questions as you're listening in class, but hold it off yet. Like you can write it down somewhere, but continue to listen to the teaching material and then contemplate about or ask your question right after class. But while you're still in class, just listen to all the teachings and hold it in, and then you can do your digestion or your thinking after the classes. And of course, we hope that you would come to this class with an open mind. We may have learned about the Buddhist teachings before, here and there, but as you're coming to the class, just come in like you're a new student who have never learned about Buddhism before and observe these material. Then right after class, you can then think about, okay, is this the same as what you have learned before, or is it different? And if it's different, like then you need to figure out, okay, which one it's really like according to what the Buddha taught. So in class, just plainly listen and come in with an open mind. And the second step, a very important step, is to contemplate. Contemplation is about thinking about the teachings and trying to observe and relate these teachings to your life. We have to remember that the Buddha only discovered these teachings. He said that even if he was not born in the world, the teachings, these truths are still there because this is just how the universe runs. We can say that these teachings are sort of like the law of how the universe runs. And so this is also like drinking water. If I drink water and I try to describe to you what the water tastes like, would you know how it's like? Probably not. You can think about it, but if I tell you, oh, it's lukewarm, like the lukewarm that you have in mind might be different than the lukewarm that I have in mind. So it's not until you really drink it for yourself, then you would know what the waters taste like. And this is why we said that no one can help us in cultivation except for ourselves. This is like changing a bad habit. No one can change it for us, like our parent, teachers cannot change it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And contemplation is an important step in learning Buddhism because it's the step that helps us in changing our perspective and guide us in seeing the world as it is. I remembered when I was young, I really used to think that like I would see the world clearly with one eye, but I would see a very blurry world with my other eyes. And I think this is normal. I thought this is how everyone is. I really do believe it. And so, but of course, with one blurry eye and one eye that can see the world clearly, obviously, this will lead me to misreading something or miss some of the details. It is not until that my parent took me to see the optometrist that I realized, oh, this is actually not normal. What I have been seeing is not how the world is. So finally, I get to see the world as it is when I have my pair of glasses. And I really think this is sort of like learning Buddhism when I see it. Like before we learn Buddhism, we might think that the world that we see is how the world is. We didn't realize that some of our thoughts are not correct. It's like, for example, like the Buddhists teach us that things changes all the time, like all phenomena changes, but we might believe that, oh no, it's permanent. It would always be that way. And so we might think that how our perspective or our view is correct. It's not until that we learn about the Buddhist teachings and really observe the world ourselves that we realize that, oh yeah, how we view the world before it's actually incorrect. So the Buddha is like the doctor who prescribed the medicine to us to cure us of our sickness, to really help us to see ourselves and the world with the correct perspective, the correct view. And so that we can act skillfully and really find this peace within. Contemplation is also like digesting food. Well, you can think of it as listening is like eating the food, but if we eat the food, we need to digest it in order for us to get the nutrients from it. But if we don't digest the food, then I'm just chewing it, but I'm not like digesting it in my stomach, then I still cannot get the nutrients. So contemplation is really like digesting these food, like digesting the teachings that we have. So it's only through this process of digesting, then will we be able to find way to relate the teachings to our life and finally apply this to our life. But of course, some people might ask, oh, well, you talk about contemplation. What do we contemplate about? Like, what do we think about? So here are some guidelines that you guys can see a bit helpful to yourself. I think contemplation of the Dharma, it's like you can ask yourself, okay, do I really understand the concept? Like, what is this about? Or do I believe in it? Like, can I observe this in my life? So it's also about always keeping the teachings in my mind and have questions about the teachings. But of course, there are other ways of contemplating as well. I remembered one venerable shared with me that like she would memorize the definitions from the sutras and then really like think about what that definition really means. So holding it in our mind. And next, after we contemplate and digest the food, we have to practice. Practicing is very important. It really starts with who we are and what we actually do. It's basically in every single moment of our life. We need to learn to control our negative impulse and then learn to tame our monkey mind. Also, through contemplating and practicing the Dharma in our life, we will gain wisdom. And with wisdom, we would be able to work with all kinds of obstacles or difficulties in life. Practicing the Dharma also means to experience it for ourselves. Well, let me tell you a story to demonstrate this point. So in ancient time, a lot of Chen students would actually travel afar to find a good Chan master to learn from. And so there were these four Chen students who planned to travel across the province to study with a renowned Chen master. As they were traveling, they encountered different difficulties and they were tired. And finally, they were able to stay at a shelter overnight. So after a night rest, they continue with their journey. But one person start to slowly slow down and ultimately just stop by the side of the road and rest. And the other three students turned to this person and said, "Come on, we can help you carry your baggage. We can help you with everything. But there are two things that we cannot help you with. We cannot help you with sleeping, and we cannot help you with eating." And that student said, "I don't need you to help me with eating and sleepings." And his companions then finally said, "We can help you with walking as well." So what the young Chan student are trying to tell his companion is that no one can help us with our practice except for ourselves. So if he really want to seek the way, he need to do it for himself. So it's the same with the Buddha's teachings. Like the Buddhas told us about Dharma already, but to truly understand them, we have to rely on ourselves. The master or the teachers can only guide us, but practice is on us. It is not something that we would gain just by listening. It's not something that we can understand just by listening either. We need to contemplate and then practice it before we can fully realize and understand it, these truths. Practicing doesn't mean we just like do sitting meditation or like chanting or chanting mantras or the Buddha's name. It's more about cultivating this mind, because our mind gives rise to speech and actions. And of course, there's a Buddhism saying that said, talking about the Dharma for 10 minutes is not as valuable as practicing it for 1 minute. So from this, you can see that how important practicing is. And the last step is realization. Through contemplation and practice, we'll realize the Dharma we experience in our life is really what the Buddha taught. So this is really about experiencing the Dharma so that we know for ourselves that, oh, it is as such. It is as the Buddha taught. The way that I like to think about this is doing a science experiment. I'm sure all of you have done a science report before and then doing your science experiment. Normally, before we do a science experiment, we need to have a hypothesis. And so the Buddhist teachings is like this hypothesis. And then after we have a hypothesis, we have to do the experiment. So for our practice, basically, we really applied what the Buddhas taught in our life and experience all these dharma. So we do this again and again and again. So we observe, we contemplate, we practice again and again and again. And then ultimately we'll come up to the conclusion and we'll realize that, oh, it is as the Buddha taught. The Dharma is as such. And so this is what realization is about. And I think this is why our faith in Buddhism is very firm at that point, because we have been there and done that. We experience it for ourselves. So we know for sure this is how it is. So to sum up, we have to listen and learn the teachings, then digest what we learn through contemplation. As we continue to contemplate, we then try to apply it and practice it in our life. And once we continue to cultivate, we will gain insight onto the Buddha's teachings. Now, let me give you an example of the fourth step. Let's say we learn impermanence, like teachings of impermanence in one class. So you listen to what impermanence is in class, like impermanence is about changing continuously. So all phenomena are changing continuously all the time. And so you learn all about it in class. Then afterward, when you're home, you start to contemplate. You start to first think, okay, what is impermanence? Can impermanence refer to changes in all phenomena? So the Buddha told us that everything, all phenomena, changes. So now we think, okay, is this true? So we can take a walk and start to observe our environment. Okay, are the house is changing all the time? Are the plant changing all the time? Obviously, you don't see it right at that moment, but then it does change. You see that, oh, the tree grow and then it blooms flowers and then it has fruit and then now it not wither, but the leaf fell. And then in spring, the leaf grew again. So there are changes. It's changing all the time. Then afterward, you can think, okay, am I changing as well? So you can then observe yourself. Am I changing? Oh yeah, I need to trim my nail like maybe like once every 2 weeks. Yeah, it's changing. It's growing. If we're not changing, we probably could not grow from a baby to who we are right now. And so you can observe all your life situation. Is it changing all the time? And see it for yourself. And of course, after you do your contemplation every day, I hope, then you can really apply it to your life. So when things happen, you quickly need to remind yourself, okay, things changes. I may not be in a good spot right now, but that doesn't mean it will be the same forever. So it would change. So you basically have this dialogue with yourself, and slowly through all these dialogue, you would slowly be able to let go of these afflictions. And of course, ultimately, as we continue with this in our life, ultimately one day we'll realize, yes, all phenomena indeed changes all the time. And this is where your realizations come in. And so this is basically the process of learning Buddhism. And now that we learn about the process, a very important question that we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of attitude should we have when we learn Buddhism? And of course, there are 3 of them. There are a lot, but these 3 are very important, I think. They are humility, like having a humble mind, a curious mind, and persistencies, because it does take time. And so let me go into each of it. So for humbleness or humilities, the Buddha always warned his disciple to be humble, because arrogance is like a tall mountain. It can't be moved by anything. Think about it. if someone is already stuck with a certain understanding or perceptions, when you want to tell him, okay, this is what the Buddha taught, would he accept? He probably would not. He will not accept others people teachings or opinion, because he's already fearing that, no, I know the best. You guys don't know anything at all. So he would stop learning. He would stop growing. So we have to learn to be humble. And this is why arrogance is considered one of the poisons in Buddhism, because it would prevent us from really listening to what the Dharma is and really accepting it. And so when we listen to the Dharma, we need to be humble and accept the teachings. Even if we have listened to the Dharma before, like you have studied 4 teachings before, you're taking it again, just listen with an open mind and just accept it as if this is the first time you hear it. Mainly because different teachers might have a different perspective on the same core teachings. Like it still mean the same, but then they might tackle it or explain it in a different perspective that might be more connected to you, or that help you understand easier. And also, with our life experience and practice, sometimes as you listen to the teachings again, you would have a different realization. So, this is why in Buddhism, we always want every one of us, all practitioners, to listen to the Dharma again and again and again. So, this is just like me, like I'm teaching core teachings, like I've learned them before, I have taught them before, but every single time I go back to the teachings, I really learn something new and I have a different understanding. So don't think that, oh, I've learned it before and you feel like you don't need to learn it. Please, that's arrogance. We need to always be humble as we're learning the Dharma. And I was reading a story the other day, and I really think it really like portrait as such. Once there's a Buddhist master who saw a homeless orphan, like a teenager, wandering down the street. And this master offered to take him into the temple, and later on, this orphan become a novice monk. And this novice monk was very smart. He learned everything very quickly. But then the master noticed that he had one great weakness, and that is he is very arrogant and he loved to be complimented by people. So one day, the master gave him a pot of orchid katis and asked the novice monks to watch the blooming flowers at night. And on the next day, the novice monks start to tell the master how beautiful the flower is and how great they smell and how great it is. And the master asked him, did they make a lot of noises and wake you up? And the novice monk said, no, no, they just quietly bloom and quietly withered the next morning. And the master then said, oh, I thought they would make a lot of noises to compliment themselves. Upon hearing this, the novice monk felt very ashamed of himself, and he understood what the master is trying to tell him. This story is to tell us that we need to have humility as we learn and practice. It is only through having humilities can we continue to improve ourselves and open up our mind to the teachings. When we learn from the Dharma, we need to let go of our own arrogance and prejudice. Otherwise, no matter how great the Dharma is, it would never be able to help us in our life. This is why there is a saying in Buddhism that go like this: we can only learn the Dharma from being humble. And next, it's also very important for us to have a curious mind. Like, do we really want to find answers to our problems? If we really think about it, a lot of time we try to hide or escape from our problems, or try to procrastinate in dealing with them. And of course, this is why we lose ourselves in online games, shoppings, watching movies, and so on. Some people might even go into the extreme of losing themselves in alcohol and drugs. We don't really want to face the problems in our life, or we might feel that we're powerless to fix it. However, because we all want to have happiness, we would divert our attentions to something that help us forget about these problems, even if it's only for a short time. Then slowly it become a habit, even though we know that it's not good for us, but we continue to do it anyway. So if we want to find ways to end our sufferings, like the Buddha, we should start with searching for answers and solutions to our problems. So we need to ask ourselves, okay, why does this happen? What can I do to like help myself to get out of the situation? Like just like the Buddha. Remember the life of the Buddha? Prince Siddhartha saw these old age, sickness, and death, and this is when he started to ask this big questions of how can I end the sufferings? And this is how he started off on his journey. And I'm sure, like I've mentioned, some of us might have decided to take this class because we're asking, okay, how can the Buddhist teachings help me with problems in my life? And so this is how it guides you into here. And so just like when we get sick, we want to see the doctor to figure out, like ask, okay, why am I feeling like this? And try to find a solution to end it, right? And so we start the spiritual journey by asking questions. The Buddha actually always encouraged his disciples to ask questions and not just to believe him when he talked about it. And so this is why he would say, don't believe me just because I said it. You have to try it out for yourself. See for yourself. So now I'm also telling you, don't believe me just because I said it. All of you should try it out for yourself and observe it for yourself. Observe them, the teachings in your life. And this is also why in the Chan tradition, there's a saying, one who has small doubt would gain small enlightenment. One who has great doubt would gain great enlightenment. And one who has no doubt won't gain an enlightenment. So one thing that we need to keep in mind though, having doubt or asking question doesn't mean we become skeptical. So there's a difference between that. Okay. And last, we need to be persistent. Learning Buddhism requires persistencies. There's just no shortcut to it. This is like changing a bad habit. Can we change the instant that we decide to change? Probably not. The psychologist told us that if we want to change a bad habit, we need to perform the good habit for 21 days consistently before we can change this habit. So it takes time and effort. Cultivation is also the same. Think about cultivation, a lot of it is about changing perspective, learning to view the world in the right perspective with right view. And if changing a physical, like a behavior habit, take 21 days of doing a good habit, then how long do you think it would take for us to change our mental habit? Probably quite a long time as well. And practice required persistencies because this is like this room you see in the image. It's dusty. We probably haven't cleaned it for like, let's say 10 years. And if you want to clean it right now, can you clean it with just one wipe? Like just sweep the floor one time, wipe the piano or the wall one time? Probably not. It would still be pretty dusty. It would take like cleaning the room over and over again, like for several times or more than 10 times or even longer before it would be all clean again. So this is the same. because think about, we have been nurturing like a lot of bad habits, whether it's in the way that we think or the way that we do things. It would take time to change them. This is just like someone who is pessimistic. If I tell her, no, think on the positive side, do you think she will be able to change how she think like after I tell her? Probably no. Like you can like experiment on yourself with this. Like if someone tell you, okay, now like do like think this way. Do you think you can like think like as such the moment that the person say it? Probably not. Or even the moment that you decide to change, you won't be able to change right on the spot. We're not like light switch turning on and turning off, unfortunately. So it does take time. And whenever we learn something, a lot of time we hope to learn it instantly. Like uh, especially in the current time, we want it fast, we want it right now. But this is not how learning Buddhism is about. This is just like what I've mentioned about with changing the way that we think about things. All the great empires do not arise in one day, and an old tree do not just grow up in one day either. So awakening itself, it only takes one moment. However, to get to the awakening, it does take a long time to cultivate. So as a practitioners, we need to be able to endure and persist in our practice. And this is the first thing that we need to learn. Okay. And last but not least, I would like to share one last story with all of you. Actually, it's also a story that I've heard from a teacher, a venerable, when I was learning about Buddhism. Okay. Once, there is a baker who lived next to the Chan master. And the baker, of course, was very respectful to the Chan master. So on this particular morning, the baker finished making a fresh load of bread, and he was very excited, and he was so excited and want to offer it to the Chan master that he forgot to take off his apron. So he quickly grabbed his load of bread and went next door and knocked on the Chan master door. Knock, knock, knock. And the Chan master opened up the door and saw him, his bread, and his apron. And the baker was about to say, Master, I want to offer this to you. The Chan master actually closed the door on him. The baker was actually in shock. He was thinking, okay, what's going on? Why did the Chan master close the door on me? And not long after, the Chan master opened up the door again. But this time, what the baker noticed was the Chan master actually went back in and changed into his Dharma robe. And of course, at this point, the baker was very curious and he asked the Chan master, why did you went back and change into your Dharma robe? And the Chan master said, it is because you have come to me sincerely to offer this loaf of bread in your working clothes. So I need to be respectful of you. So in return, I need to go back and change into my working robe, which is my Dharma robe, into receiving these offerings. So all of you have sincerely come, well, registered for this course and come to learn about the core teachings of the Buddhas. And of course, in return, I'll do my best in sharing the Dharma with all of you. So let us all embark on the spiritual journey together. And last but not least, one last reminder is that I really hope that we will all keep an open mind as we're learning about the core teachings, whether you have taken the core teachings before or read the books about before. But come into the class with a brand new mind. And of course, some of these teachings may be new or foreign to you, but it's okay. As you listen, just hold it in your mind and then take some time to contemplate about them afterward. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to, I think you should be able to email me or post your questions in the classroom, or we can talk about this in the Q&A sessions. And thank you very much for listening to this class. I'll see you all next week. Please take care and stay safe. 弥陀佛。